To some, this might be a controversial statement. Hate speech is free speech as long as it doesn't contain any threats of violence. Hello, I'm Ian and welcome to Current Year, where we talk about all things that are going on in the current year. I think most people would agree that free speech is absolutely paramount, and part of free speech is hate speech. And a good example of this is back in the 1970s, the National Socialist Party wanted to go and do a protest march through Skokie, Illinois. For those of you who aren't aware, Skokie, Illinois is a village outside of Chicago that is predominantly Jewish. Hence the reason why the Nazis want to go and do a march through Skokie. Obviously, people were not happy by this and they tried to bar the march, where they got the ACLU involved and it went to court. And the ACLU actually won the case and allowed the Nazis to go and march through Skokie, Illinois. However, times have changed. Not necessarily for the good, though. It doesn't matter how much you like it or not. People are allowed to have contradictory opinions than you. People are allowed to hate things and unfortunately hate people as well. It's not illegal, but it seems like they're trying very, very hard to make it illegal. And first off, we have to go and define what hate speech actually is. And because this video primarily is dealing with the UN and hate speech, we're going to use their definition, which I think is relatively accurate. Hate speech refers to offensive discourse targeting a group of individuals based on inherent characteristics such as race, religion, or gender, and may threaten social peace. The issue is, as time goes on, obviously language evolves with it. Sometimes not for the better. In the case of hate speech, they're wanting to go and include threats of violence, which is already not protected under free speech. Now, when I go and just do a Google on define hate speech, we get this: abusive or threatening speech, or writing that expresses prejudice on the basis of ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or similar grounds. According to Cambridge Dictionary, hate speech is defined as public speech that expresses hate or encourages violence towards a person or group based on something such as race, religion, sex, or sexual orientation. Now, as you can see, what they're trying to do is conflate speech with threats of violence, which is not covered under free speech. And it's being done for obvious reasons. It's so they can get rid of what they consider to be hate speech by saying it leads to violence or that violence is a part of hate speech. And this is not good, because where do you draw the line at this point when it comes to hate speech? There's lots of things that I don't like and I actually do hate, but because I go and criticize something, it could be lumped in to hate speech because it is criticizing a group of people. The issue is, where does this stop? Because if you go and criticize a movie or a TV show, and because that movie or TV show has a minority or protected class person in it, and they frame it as hate speech, suddenly that valid criticism can be removed due to hate speech, and that is a huge problem. On June 25th, the UN released this post on Twitter. Hate speech can take many different forms, but no matter what it looks like, hate speech has real consequences. Learn how you can take action and say no to hate speech, and they go and post a link to this article. Engage. How to deal with hate speech. Hate speech occurs in all societies. Yep, that's true. That is a very accurate statement. Whether offline or online, it can sometimes be hard to assess when a comment is meant as hate speech, especially when expressed in a virtual world. It can also feel overwhelming to try and deal with obvious hateful content. However, there are many ways you can take a stand, even if you are not personally the victim of hate speech, and you can make a difference. The following tips may be helpful. When it comes to hate speech online, the easiest way, in my opinion, to deal with it is to simply go ignore it or just mute the asshole online. But that's me. And as a content creator, I often get not so flattering comments on occasion because it's the internet and I honestly fully expect it. But when I do, I just don't give it air. And if I do, I'm doing it to make fun of them because I'm an asshole like that. And again, as I stated earlier, hate speech is not the same as making a threat of violence, because a threat of violence is not protected under free speech. And that is the only time you really should be concerned, is somebody is actually making a threat to you, whether it's online or in person. This is different than saying, I don't like you, or I don't like you because of XYZ. This is somebody actually making a credible threat, which is different than hate speech. Pause. Refrain from making any hateful comments yourself and or relaying such content. Whether online or offline, we should all act responsibly to stop the spread of hate and misinformation. Check out the United Nations Pledge to Pause campaign to find out why it's important to take a moment to pause before you share content online. Learn how to do this responsibly, whether you're forwarding a message, retweeting a story, or watching a video in your feed. My first thoughts on this is, wait a second. Isn't the whole point of the UN is to prevent wars between countries? I mean, it gives a space for countries to go and air their grievances to prevent, let's say, I don't know, nuclear annihilation, like what we're running into right now, potentially with Russia and Ukraine. You know, that should be the priority, not hate speech. That seems ultimately counterproductive. But, you know, I guess the UN just needs an easy win right now, because they are a terrible organization. My issue with this is that sometimes the best way is to take the piss out of something, usually in the form of retweeting and mocking the person who made the hateful comment, whatever. The other issue is that now you can see that they're slipping misinformation in there as well, which is completely not related to hate speech. Take a look at the Hunter Biden laptop story that was posted online by the New York Post and subsequently censored on Twitter because they claimed it was misinformation. Well, it turns out the FBI knew it was true and it was getting out there, and they decided to contact social media companies saying, well, we believe that this is Russian misinformation, which is ironic considering what they told these companies was misinformation. The issue with misinformation is the fact that sometimes true information can get labeled as misinformation, and it won't be till months, years, weeks later that we find out in reality it was true. It goes back down to who is the authoritative source when it comes to the truth. Is it big corporations, the government, or you? Fact check. In the digital world, it is common to come across misinformation and harmful content, but it is relatively easy to verify content you find is reliable. To detect false bias information, including hate speech, propaganda, be sure to check the content's origin with the help of search engines, fact-checking tools, and other reliable sources. You can also download images and run them through image search tools to find out where they first appeared. The issue here is, who fact checks the fact checkers? Because we know that they have biases. I mean, Snopes has become a joke. It used to be a great tool back in the late 90s and early 2000s, but they have their issues, and something that could be online that is actually true can be presented as false by the way they frame it. And when it comes to fact checking, a lot of it is more along the lines of narrative checking. Does it fall into the prescribed narrative? And if it doesn't, it gets flagged as being false. Like I said, it's all about how you frame the question. React. Whenever possible, do not remain silent, even when it is others who are targeted. Speak up calmly but firmly against hate speech and call it out to make it clear that you do not agree with the content of the statement. When relevant, refute the misinformation with facts, providing reliable sources to back up your argument. And honestly, that last bit, I do agree with. You should always back up your statements with facts. The issue here is that we've gone from hate speech, talking about hate speech, to misinformation, which is kind of odd. I thought this article was about hate speech, unless they're trying to lump like a claim about a group of people as being misinformation. But again, that's hate speech, not misinformation. Honestly, I'm going to skip the rest of these because the most important one here that's on the list is report. Most online platforms and communities have rules to keep user discussion respectful and let you easily report hate messages to administrators or moderators. Read social media platform guidelines and tips to protect users from harassment and hate speech. If you're being harassed, isn't it your responsibility to go and report the harassment rather than some third party? Because that just seems dumb. Second off, I find it rather delicious that the UN, of all places, is encouraging people to narc other people out. I get it when you're on a forum and you want to keep civil discussion, but the idea that you see a post you don't like on Facebook or Twitter, you're encouraged to actively report it. This is basically the problem that we see online currently, particularly in the YouTube space. If somebody doesn't like your video, they will false flag it to get it taken down. And that is awful. That doesn't help the discourse. As a matter of fact, you were trying to silence your opposition at that point. And that has nothing to do with hate speech. What they are proposing is narrative control. And this is extremely dangerous because this can prevent the other side of the story from being told or heard. Back in 2018, a woman was visited by police because of something she posted on Twitter. The actual UK police showed up to her place because she posted something about trans people. In another incident, a man received a police call over a transphobic tweet that was posted on social media, where he basically calls us out as Orwellian, because that's what it is. And on top of that, these people never consider the fact that this can be used against them, because it has. In 2017, a woman posted on Facebook that men are scum, and she had her account banned. Naturally, she wasn't happy about it, citing censorship. But this is what you get in the long run. When you advocate for people being silenced over hate speech, what makes you think that you're going to be immune? It is going to be used against you in the end. And ultimately, this is the problem with hate speech. It is nothing more than a weapon to be used to silence your opposition. And we've seen this already. Look at YouTube, for example, where they took away the dislike button, or Rotten Tomatoes when they start censoring comments. Because God forbid you say something that might hurt the feelings of the President of the United States or a very large corporation like Disney. Disney, of all people. Technically, it's a person because it's a corporation. Anyway, remember, folks, remember, freedom will always be on the right side of history. This is Ian, signing off.